Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be talking about the newest album from the XX called I See You. This is a bit of an odd case, and one that you don't typically see. I can't deny I'm a little bit amused by it, but the whole novelty of the situation means that we should probably get used to seeing this more often. Given the way things are going in modern pop, I see this happening more often. See, I like the XX. As an indie pop group, they worked in refining very sleek, reserved, R&B inspired pop songs, tapping into a certain minimalistic shyness that can be pretty damn compelling in the right setting. And while I thought their sophomore album Coexist didn't quite connect as strongly as their self-titled debut, and despite entirely too many indie pop groups following in their wake to muddle this sort of quiet introspection and make a lot of boring garbage, I did see a real place for the XX. Not exactly a big place, I would never call myself a huge fan of this band, but they didn't need a lot of space to make their points, and I definitely respect that. And then their producer, Jamie XX, released In Color in 2015. Picking up vocal performances from both of his bandmates, it was one of the biggest indie records of 2015, and for damn good reason, as it picked up a ton of critical acclaim for its lush, gorgeously organic, potent as hell production. Sure, it wasn't doing anything all that new in terms of modern electronic music, but it had a level of taste and swell and potency that really set it apart, easily making it one of my favorites of that year, more than I ever could have possibly expected. Keep in mind, I was just getting into more electronic music in 2015. For it to grab my attention the way it did, that is saying something. But it also raised a fascinating question when it comes to band dynamics. The solo side project that blew up from the XX was from their producer, and with a decidedly different sound and approach to the main group. Now, Buzz was suggesting they'd be following along with a bigger sound, but could that potentially compromise the reserve and subtlety that made the XX so distinctive in indie pop? In other words, I was decidedly curious where about I See You was going. So where did it go? Well, if anything, the XX made the record that is such a natural evolution given the past couple of years that it's almost not even surprising. Following in the wake of Jamie XX's success, there's more samples, a choice to embrace a larger, slightly more expansive sound and mix, but they went even further than that, because not only is I See You the natural sonic evolution, it's the natural thematic evolution as well, all while still preserving in concept and framework the formula that made the XX so damn effective. In other words, unless you seriously get hung up on the sonic shift, and I can see that happening for some people, I can see a lot of fans of the XX really liking this. And yeah, I'll definitely include myself in that group because I like this album a lot. But the first thing to stress here is that the core of the XX's sound is still here. Romy Madley Croft, the liquid but defined guitar lines, Oliver Sims' prominent bass, and vocal chemistry and interplay that only seems to be getting better with every subsequent album as Croft's voice picks up more expressive subtlety. Seriously, if you liked her expressive presence on songs like Loud Places off of In Color, which is one of my favorite songs of 2015 for the record, it's amazing, you're going to love her on this album. Her poise and yet vulnerability is beautifully realized. It's almost a shame that Oliver Sim just isn't quite advancing as a singer at the same rate. He is becoming a more expressive vocalist, and there are definitely points on songs like Replica and A Violent Noise where he absolutely nails that narrow balance of tension and yearning, but Croft at this point, she's just in a different ballpark. It is absolutely stunning. She sounds amazing here, and that does lead to a bit of an imbalance when it comes to the vocalists, and their chemistry can feel a little skewed. But what will draw a lot more attention is Jamie XX's production work, because while he's always been a master of the fine details and subtlety, balancing the sunken reverb with the sparse grooves that have always been at the foundation of the XX's formula, and blending it with gorgeously organic texture, avoiding the sterility that has crippled so many albums dousing themselves in reverb, especially in the mainstream. But this album, it's aiming bigger. Promoting mixer Rondé McDonald, you'll recognize that name from How to Dress Well in Savages. He's up to now co-producer. The first signs of a more aggressive sound come through in the first track, Dangerous, with ominous shrill blasts of synth horns opening against a roiling bass groove against the scratchy percussion, calling to mind the night of a party that will start off that's designed to send into reckless territory. But what's interesting is how the melodies are placed within the mix on this and subsequent songs. Very audible, playing a key role in the balance and the hook, but they're they're also kind of midway back, a fair bit behind the vocals and the slightly blurred over to boot, especially those guitar tones, masterfully capturing the feel of closeness and isolated intimacy within a much larger, noisier scene around our protagonist. Now, this was something Jamie XX touched into for the festival Ready in Color, but by necessity, the smaller scope of this album narrows that sensory focus, leaving the guitars and spurts of jagged synth lingering in the background like on Lips, the samples only adding further color to songs that are only ever noticed in the background. Even on a track like On Hold, where the Hall & Oates sample anchors the hook, it actually fits pretty well. Again, it is a command of atmosphere and mood that Jamie XX captures incredibly well, and leads to some really potent, subtle flourishes to songs like A Violent Noise, where against a jagged melody line, the guitar drops out to use negative space as musical punctuation on the hook, or in the fragile elegance of performance, with ill-fitting touches of elegance in the strings that contrast really powerfully against the mournful guitars, that later use the hazier guitar line to build against more of a foundation that feels more real on Brave for You, less elegant to be sure, but there's more to it, or the washed out shimmering liquidity of Replica, even just subtle moments like the multi-track swell of the hook of I Dare You, or the absolutely heartbreaking fragile piano progression of Test Me that lets the horns just linger in the background, with the vocal placement highlighting a distance that the outro manifests in vocal fragments swirling into the sky against pieces of melody. Honestly, the production is so damn good that it raises the question of whether or not I could find flaws with it, and if I were to nitpick, I do think some of the samples like on Say Something Loving or Lips could have been a shade better blended into the rest of the mix, or the liquid blur guitars, they do begin to run together and feel a little bit monochromatic. They could stand out or have a little bit more of a different texture between songs, but you know what, I have a hard time complaining about it because that slightly washed out color so perfectly complements the lyrics and thematic arc of this album. And again, it's a little bit tough to describe what makes the XX's lyrics work so damn well for me, but the core of it is very much at the core of so much great pop music, saying a lot with very few words. There isn't a wasted syllable on a song from the XX, and while it can make a couple of their songs feel a little bit barren of greater detail, the delivery is often so damn good that you can pick out bigger strings of universality that, if anything, are magnified on this album. And because, and this might surprise you, for the XX, this is their party album, one that ventures out into the night to find some vestige of escape, populist and well-framed enough to acknowledge their own lingering weaknesses and very real flaws and insecurities as protagonists, as they put aside their own shyness and introversion to find something, anything out there. Now that's one of the reasons why this record has a fair amount of resonance for me. Both Sim and Croft are both so fully realized characters, with Croft's hesitant bravery and desperation balanced against Sim's own very carefully contained fears and apathy, that you understand exactly why they'd find the danger in each other on the opening track, even though they're both introverts, why they would second guess each other in every step of the connection on Say Something Lovely, and their disenchantment with the party hollowing out very real connections that they could have on A Violent Noise. But their loneliness, it drives them to engage anyway, from Croft's walking performance, which is the only way that she feels that she'll see any sort of attention, be it from anyone else or her ex, her dogged commitment to do it for herself, only masking a deeper grief there, to Sims's growing feeling that he's falling into a lingering routine that will see nothing improve on Replica, afraid to change things for fear that it all could go so horribly wrong. And there are a few songs that capture that very realistic sense of modern relationship status quite so well as On Hold. Croft just moves on after being held at a distance and he's not replying, and Sim is left kind of confused. He thought they could have had something, he was gonna come back to it, but it's just entirely too late. It's why I Dare You and Test Me work so damn well as album closers, and capturing the spirit that lies in this record's title. It's clear that both partners, they see each other and know exactly what the other is doing, and know that the other person knows that, so the biggest step comes in making that dare, making that choice to push past introspective hesitation and take upon reality, even though that could be the real change that breaks everything apart. And then you read an interview, and you realize that on Test Me, it isn't just about abstract relationships, but instead drawing deeper parallels to how the XX operate as a band and people as a relationship, with the choices coming with greater experimentation that could compromise what they originally were with their decided formula, and with the lyrical references to performance and repetition, and being brave enough to step into some dangerous territory, with Violent Noises all the more stark by going bigger with this sort of production. Okay, it's definitely a reach to include the entire record in that context, especially songs like the more straightforward Lips or the tribute to Going Forward in the memory of her parents passing, like for Brave for You with Croft. But you know what? Thematically, on some level, it works. This is an album about acknowledging the choices that lie ahead, moving past losses, failure, and stasis, and continuing just to plow forward even if it is uncomfortable. And it hits at a core of modern relationships among introverts, among some of us, that I found really powerful, really compelling. Both partners, prospective, current, and ex, they can all have knowledge of the world at their fingertips. They know exactly what's going on, but not moving is also a choice. And if you want to advance to find deeper closure, deeper passion, the choice has to be made. And as such, you know what? I think this is on par with their debut album, or at the very least pretty damn close to it. Now, I'm not gonna say I like I See You more than In Color. That album just captured a sense of scope and atmosphere so fully that it blows me away to this day. But for me, yeah, I really like this. This is a very solid 8 out of 10 and definitely a recommendation, especially if you're a fan of the XX that's a little bit more open-minded. Once again, an object lesson on how doing a little bit less can mean so much more. I See You, the XX. Damn fine work indeed. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I got a bit of a new lighting rig here. I'm still not sure how much I like it, so I'm still trying to figure things out and trying to get this all balanced out properly. But if you guys, I got my poll over here, so you guys can all tell me whether or not you like this album. It's been getting pretty good critical reception, but I've seen some The XX fans not quite being on board, so I'm curious about your thoughts. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. I had a link to buy the album in the description below. And if you guys want to get involved in my schedule, the link to my Patreon is right there. 3 times a week you get to vote. Once a week for the higher Patreon contributors, you get to add albums or movies to my schedule. And the link to there for more details is right there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.